Welcome, everybody. Today we have Jared Tendler here. Jared is a mental game coach currently working for Team Liquid. He is an author, has worked for numerous other professional sports. He also was an All-American golfer in college. And we're going to talk about some of that cool stuff today and get to a lot of that. So welcome, Jared.
Hey, thanks, man. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, so my first question for you before we really even, and I guess this is part of the interview, but what does that mean you're a mental coach?
Yeah, I mean, basically, like my responsibility is trying to get rid of the emotions that cause a lot of problems in, esport athletes or poker players or day traders or golfers, as well as like develop strategies to learn faster and also get in the zone more consistently, to focus better, to improve your decision making. A lot of the places where I'm working, the people that I'm working with, decision making is kind of like the muscle, within the mind, right? So, an esports athlete, right, their decision making is, kind of fundamentally almost like a psychological process. And so it kind of, pigeonholes into the work that I do because, if your decision making is breaking down, much like a golfer's golf swing or, an athlete's technique, sometimes there are, kind of mental processes that can be better understood to help improve that decision making, aside from, the tilt or the anxiety or
Sure.
the confidence issues that are going to kind of impair that as well.
Sure. So when did you first get involved in sports altogether? Did you play your whole life? I assume golf. I mean, you were a big golfer, right?
Truthfully, I actually started in tennis. I mean, I started playing tennis, I think, when I was like 2 or 3 years old.
Okay.
My parents were athletes and, so I just kind of grew up doing whatever I could, baseball, basketball, playing backyard football and sports with friends and whatnot. I kind of tended towards individual sports. So golf became another big one. Freshman year of high school, I was 4'11", and making the transition from a little league baseball field to a big league,
Sure.
big field was just not going to happen as much as I wanted to. And golf, tennis, and baseball were all spring sports.
Sure.
Tennis, I was actually ranked in the state of Connecticut as a junior, not very high, but still ranked. Decent tennis player. But but from a young age though, I always had a dream to be a professional athlete and to compete at the highest level. So I kind of made a calculation as a freshman. It was like, golf seemed to be the best option. I was improving a lot at that point.
Yeah.
Height was definitely a legitimate issue, right? Michael Chang back when I was a kid and, Andre Agassi were like the only two like successful tennis players, like under 6 feet. So, that was kind of a low probability option. And then I also had, my grandparents played golf at a pretty high level and, saw that they were playing into their 70s and 80s. So, it's kind of cool to think I could pick up this game that I could potentially play for a lifetime and, ideally play professionally.
So did you get a scholarship to college? Did you go to, so you went to Skidmore College. Did you go to college to play golf, or was that kind of a partial plan at least?
Yeah. I mean, I got good late, too late to get like a Division I scholarship.
Gotcha.
And Division III does not give out scholarships. I think I could have transferred my sophomore year and probably could have gotten one, but at that point I was pretty happy. And I also made the calculation to not like try to walk onto a program and wanted to also kind of hedge my bet a little bit and, go to a school that I knew was going to kind of give me a good backup plan if golf wasn't going to work out, which, turned out to be the case.
Sure. So you were an All-American golfer. What does that mean to be an All-American?
So there are a couple ways you could earn it. You could either finish in the top 15 of the national championship, or you could have such a successful year that you get what's called an honorable mention, which is what happened for me one of the 2 years. But two of the 3 years that I was an All-American, I finished 9th and 13th in the Division III national championship.
Gotcha. Cool. So you had to pick a major in college. You go into psychology, and why that interest? Did you just take a class? Did you know someone in the field? Like, what prompted you to want to do that?
I mean, I was actually a business major and ended up having a dual major. But my sophomore, junior year is when I started playing. Actually, freshman year of college, that summer, I tried qualifying for the U.S. Open, and the U.S. Open is pretty amazing because I think close to a half of the field, so 156 players, close to a half have to qualify, which means you're playing in a qualifying event with some of the best golfers in the world.
Sure.
And there are 2 stages to that qualifying. The first round is called local qualifying, and it's typically the scrubs who are kind of the dreamers. But it's 18 holes, and if you play well, like you basically advance to that sectional stage, and you could literally be playing almost like a small PGA Tour event because of the number of PGA Tour players that are there.
Sure.
So in that qualifier, my freshman year, 1997, I played the best golf of my life from tee to green, and completely choked on the greens. So, hit 13 fairways out of 14, hit 16 out of 18 greens, and made a bunch of birdies. But I missed a bunch of putts from this length, just because of the pressure. So at that point, it was like that was really the first time that had ever happened before, and so I didn't really think too much of it. But a friend of mine at the club that I played at, gave me the book by Bob Rotella called "Golf Is Not a Game of Perfect." And that kind of just began my kind of education on the psychology of the game. I really never thought about the mental game prior to that. And so, kind of kept improving and, getting better. But then by sophomore, junior year, like it just sort of kept happening that in big national events, I was choking. Now, I still won 9 times in college. I mentioned, kind of where I finished in nationals. But in those big events, I was kind of getting tripped up. And so I at that point, I kind of realized like, sports psychology, golf psychology had kind of taken me, at least in my opinion, as far as it could. And it was kind of, I had taken both a psychology class in high school, and then taken a survey class in college. And it kind of reasoned that a lot of sports psychology at this point was kind of behavioral, somewhat cognitive, but really it was like, okay, you're not confident. We're going to teach you to be confident. You're feeling pressure. We're going to teach you this very rigid routine, and we're going to teach you to breathe and try to get you to relax. And to me, it was kind of like a ones and zeros kind of thing. It's like, trying to just switch the light switch off, or turn it on if you're trying to get yourself more confident. And it just seemed to be kind of too simple for me. And I kind of dove a bit deeper into psychology and was thinking that, maybe like a therapist who's trained to get at the roots of issues and really solve problems at a deeper level, that maybe that's the angle I could take. And if I could combine, sort of the sports psychology, the counseling psychology side with the sports psychology side, then maybe I would solve my own issues. And then, backup plan would be that I would, have a coaching career or a career where we're kind of working with athletes, specifically golfers.
So you decided this, you kind of got into that when you were an undergrad, and then why did you get a master's? You need one in psych, right? That's like a thing you have to have?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, okay, I mean, there's some funny things with psychology, right? So it's all about names, right? You right now could hang a shingle outside your door and say that you are a psychotherapist. Okay, it is legal to do that.
Gotcha.
But like the legal profession, right? I can't just go around saying I'm a lawyer, right? Sure. I need to pass the bar. And so, to be a credentialed, therapist or counseling psychologist, actually not even a psychologist, to be a therapist, you need to have a master's degree. You need subsequently 2 years, at least in Massachusetts, where I got my degree and my license. I needed 3,200 hours of supervised practice and then pass a test to get licensed. To be a psychologist, you need a Ph.D., right? There's a lot of people in esports calling themselves a sports psychologist or an esports psychologist. And if they don't have a Ph.D., they're breaking the law, at least in the U.S. Gotcha. Or not the law, but the ethics. So, it was a kind of a decision I made truly my senior year of college. I added the psychology degree, and then went to Northeastern for my master's.
Awesome. So you're there, you take an internship while you're there, and then eventually you get into this, you come up with this idea of golf play, which I assume you had thought of before when you were an undergrad, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there was, to me, like, everybody in golf had always talked about how much of a mental game it was. And yet nobody was sort of willing to kind of put their money where their mouth was. And I was like, well, maybe, at a golf course, there should be, a golf, mental coach or a golf psychologist, sure, like at every course. Like, it just makes sense. If you're going to take lessons, why would you not work on the psychological side? So, I wanted to kind of bring, a bit more of a deeper, but yet still kind of logical and analytical approach to golf psychology. And yeah, that was kind of the calculation I made. And I think
how do you connect? I mean, you obviously had connections being an All-American in golf, playing golf. You had played probably with other PGA players and new people. So how did you convince them that this is something I'm going to start up? how do you get them? How do you go from, I have this cool idea, I'm getting my master's degree, to actually getting PGA and other golfers to try it out and make a business out of it?
Overconfidence is helpful.
Yes.
So after I got my license, in Massachusetts, it was July 2005. I quit my job and basically flew out to Arizona. Essentially knew nobody. Had a couple, kind of friends of friends of friends that, kind of got me started. I got there, made some connections, and just started building them. It was just like banging on doorsteps. Eventually, I was able to kind of find a home at a golf course called Moon Valley, which had, pretty deep connections to a club manufacturer named Ping. And because of that, there were a lot of tour pros that kind of would roll through there. I got hooked up with a golf instructor who had kind of been looking for somebody like me to kind of plug into his model, which included both, obviously the swing instruction, but also kind of the physical component. And this is still kind of early. Like Tiger, when he came on the scene, he really did kind of take like the physical development to another level, and people started working out more. And
Sure.
Back in the day, like they thought like lifting weights was just a waste. And
yeah, it wasn't going to help him be a better golfer.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, exactly. And he kind of changed that. But he also kind of changed the game in terms of the psychology. People saw kind of how mentally strong he was. And so I think because of that, there were just sort of more eyeballs and more of a desire for that. And so getting hooked up with this instructor, basically kind of gave me a home base, and I just started, trying to convince people, and, picked up one of my clients who at that point was 10 years old when he and I first started working together, is now on what's called the Corn Ferry Tour, and he's basically kind of knocking on the door of making it on the PGA Tour. But truly, other than him, I really had a lot of difficulty convincing both the like experienced amateurs and the semi-professionals. I didn't really get too many opportunities to work with PGA Tour players at that point, but I was working with some guys that were aspiring. But I was young, and it was just like I got, in large measure, it was hard to convince them to do the work that was necessary to kind of get them over the hump.
Sure.
And ironically, it was sort of serendipitously through meeting through some mutual friends on the golf course that I met a professional poker player. And this was sort of the beginnings of the online poker boom. And yeah, there was just sort of this whole wide open market, and just started working with poker players. And
so you start working with poker players, and I want to talk about what exactly you do, but I'm going to wait till we get to the esports part to talk about that. But so you start working with poker players, and you actually start working with some pool and other sports. So how do you meet a poker player, and how does that lead to you writing? You literally wrote 2 books. You've worked with 500 poker players, like tons of them. How do you get that? How do you build that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's a combination of just like drive and hard work and just the dedication to like figure out a way. I never had like the vision that I had that was clean for me was professional golf. And when that kind of, stopped, like what does my career look like long term, just never felt like it was sequential. I didn't have like that clear roadmap. I just wanted to be successful. I knew I had it in me to be that way. And so, yeah, I just felt like, kind of golf was sort of dying off. It was just hard. And here was this huge opportunity where I could just kind of reinvent myself in a sense. And there was nobody else doing it, right? There was a wide open marketplace. I could kind of drive it. And so, basically that one guy was fortunately in a very kind of prominent spot within the online poker world.
Gotcha.
He had a pretty large following with his blog. He was making these instructional videos on a website called Stocks Poker. And these online training sites had just begun popping up like 9 months prior. It was like kind of crazy timing. And so what he was struggling with at that point was massive tilt. Okay. So this is a guy who had incredible drive as well, wanted to be a professional golfer too, and just insane work ethic. He's playing 400 hours a month.
Wow.
He's playing at this point between 12 and 16 tables at one time, effectively playing 1,000 hands an hour, and he's making $1 a hand. So the biggest thing for him was, well, I'm getting so pissed off that I'm literally like punching my monitor. I'm breaking my desktop. I'm slamming my mouse.
Sure.
and I just can't get the hours in. So, he wanted help for me to stop him from tilting. And he's a pretty logical guy. My system melded with his pretty well. Within 4 months, he goes from making $10,000 to $20,000 a month to making $80,000 to $120,000 a month. And like the results were just like so ridiculous that, it was like a no-brainer for this online training site to say like, hey, do you want to make some videos for us? And at first I was like scared out of my mind because I played poker as a kid.
Sure.
Like AC-doocy and, it's like stupid stuff like that for nickels and quarters. But like, these guys are pros. These guys are making like thousands, not millions of dollars a year. Like, what can I tell them? So I literally spent, okay, maybe not literally, but it was around 400 to 600 hours developing these 4 videos that were probably a sum total of, 4.5 hours long. And the reason it took me so long is because I had to figure out like how to communicate. I didn't know poker well enough to be able to, and I knew this was an audience who you can't really bullshit. They're super skeptical. So rather than like kind of going down that route, and I even said this in the videos, I basically said, all right, I'm going to train you to think like I do so that you can figure out how to solve your own issues. And I'm just going to train you on my system. But in order to do that, I needed to even know what my system was. And so what it forced me to do was like kind of take what I had kind of developed intuitively and create this sort of external system. And it was like a remarkable process. And it was like, I'm so thankful that I had that opportunity to do and spend those 400 to 500 hours doing that, because it got me to innovate. I created some theories that I think are unique in their kind of formulation. Mm-hmm. And they're really kind of pretty helpful in terms of creating a foundation for, improvement from a mental and emotional standpoint.
And so is that what you wrote your book on, your system for poker? You wrote 2 poker books, is that?
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So basically the poker book includes, kind of the foundational system, in the first, chapters 2 to 4 being kind of the emotion, learning, and this sort of strategy. And then you basically kind of take those 3 chapters as the system and you implement it into the next 4 chapters, which are tilt, fear, motivation, and confidence. And so that if you're going to sort of figure out how to solve your own issues, you need to kind of use the system both to understand, how it's showing up for you. What are the signals that you are even tilted? I had a client who he didn't know that he was tilted until he lost 10 buy-ins, which for him was $10,000, right? So until that point, he didn't even know he was upset, right? And so it's a remarkable thing, but we oftentimes think of like awareness or recognition as being something that's just like automatic, but really it's a skill. And if you can develop that skill, then you have a chance of actually solving, your issues. I know we're kind of getting into the meat of it, but so yeah, the system is sort of what's expressed in the poker books. The second book is more, basically the first book is all about like getting rid of the crap, those issues. And then the second book is, all right, well, now that stuff is gone, let's see how good you can actually become. And so it's sort of focused on getting in the zone more often, improving your decision-making, learning faster, improving your focus, having better discipline and better motivation.
Now, see, everything you're saying to me as someone in the esports field, I 100% see how this is valuable. But how do you get into video games? Did you play games at all?
No. And this is the funny story. So I didn't play poker. And then because of poker, now you have all these traders, these day traders, finance types who play poker and they find out about the book. And then, I started working with some institutional investors and, institutional firms and some individuals. And then in 2016, Victor Goosens, who used to be roommates with a professional poker player who I know very well from the poker world, just kind of contacted me out of the blue and, asked if I was interested. And, we had some conversations and had kind of like an understanding that, there was some potential here. But again, I didn't play poker. I invest in stocks, but I'm not a trader. I played Mario Brothers and, Legend of Zelda and
sure.
Agent USA back in my Commodore 64 as a kid, but, never to this level. And so I was interested. And so this was just prior to ESL New York, the Counter-Strike event in 2016. And so I go and just to check it out. I mean, and to say my mind was blown, it was blown as much as it was when I first kind of got into the poker world. It's like, who are these people? What the hell is going on here? But I still show this picture of at least 1,000 people waiting in line to get autographs from these freaking kids. I'm like, what is going on? I mean, they're kids. It was like, they're like 18, 19-year-old kids. Like, and I'm like, so that was sort of the before, then they're going to go play. And this was like kind of the prelims. It wasn't like this at the stage yet. So we're in like the locker room at the Barclays Center, and, there's these computers set up, and, I'm just like sitting in a corner, like watching these guys talk and play. And then there's this coach. And it was like, it was just remarkable. I mean, of course I had been involved in sports all my life. So, thinking about it from a sporting side, it was massively exciting, because I saw how much inefficiency and how much there was wrong with what I was seeing. So, that was kind of the beginning. I sent like a report back to Victor of like kind of what I saw and my recommendations. And, I think we got started like a week later.
So, and for those of you that don't know, Team Liquid that he's talking about is the largest and most successful, pretty much the largest or most successful professional esports organization out there. So if you're not familiar with it, they're the big dogs. They are it. I mean, they're number one. So, okay, so you're there, you get connected with Team Liquid. So what exactly are you going to do with them? What do you do?
I mean, it's the same thing. I feel like in some ways it was like the same thing with poker, right? It's like, okay, now I have a whole different group of people who have some familiarity with sports psychology, but largely don't. They're not paying me, right? Obviously, the organization is the one that's hired me. These kids really who am I coming in and telling them what to do, right? And so there's sort of like kind of varying degrees of openness, and then there's also a big learning curve for me to like kind of understand the game and the games well enough for me to know how to help them. And so, my kind of main priority when I came in was to work with the League of Legends team, the Dota team, and the Counter-Strike team. And so, like go out to LA and meet with the League of Legends team and, draw up a vision of how we're going to win the world championship, and, have no idea how ludicrous that is to a team that, is basically going to like fight to avoid getting relegated in, the free franchising phase of the league championship series. And so, I started establishing relationships with the players and the coaches, and, with Steve, Aaron said out there, and, managers, and, just kind of figuring out. It was just kind of throwing myself, deep into the rabbit hole here and trying to figure it out. And, I mean, it definitely has taken me a couple of years to really feel like I have kind of command of the environment's command of an understanding of the game well enough for me to know how to help. And, I think fortunately I've got a great organization behind me. I mean, not only are they the biggest and the most successful, but they're just truly just great people. I mean, I think that's, oftentimes the mark of a great organization. So, it's been a great collaboration, and, we're off and running.
So you walk in, so let's just say you not necessarily your first experience working with an esports team, but you're working with Team Liquid still. So do you work with the players individually? Is this like a practice thing? Are you there when they're actually playing, like in their big thing, like in their ear at all?
Yeah, all of the above, right? So, obviously it depends on which game, right? So if we're talking Counter-Strike, there's actually, well, I guess all three games technically have, in big championships, we'll play multiple maps or multiple games. I'm there working with the players individually in terms of preparation. I'm working with the coaching staff to develop, kind of the infrastructure for how to get the players to develop, how to manage issues, how to resolve conflict, how to improve communication and teamwork, both in-game and out-of-game, right? I mean, handling criticism is a massive issue for, people in general, let alone, kind of a bunch of young men.
Sure.
Most of whom are, being coached by people who are just a couple of years older than them. So, and don't have a lot of, coaching experience, right? So I think one of the main differences we often see with esports compared to team sports is that you get somebody who's 20 to 24 years old, they have been in systems before where they've been coached.
Sure.
And had coaching for quite a long time. So even if you are a coach at that point, you've got some experience. A lot of times you've just been, kind of playing, yourself, then you get plucked into a team, and then from a team you become a coach. So there's a lot of training. So there's been a lot of opportunity to really kind of work with, kind of all levels of them. So for me, there's a lot of like kind of boot camp time where we're working individually, working as a team, working, with the coaching staff. Then there's, kind of the pre-game, work that I may do. There's the, between maps game type stuff. And then there's, either the celebration afterwards or the, help them pick themselves off the floor.
What's an example of something you'll do for them, like in game, like something, a situation? Do you have any examples of something that happened or something like? Just
I can give you a great example. So, DreamHack Dallas. This was last year with the Counter-Strike team. At this point, we are number 2 in the world. We've been the sort of the perpetual chokers in these final events. Now, from my perspective, choking is a kind of a scary term. Mm-hmm. But in my mind, like we were choking for different reasons in different finals, right? So we kept kind of falling forward. We kept learning and improving, but from the outside, it was like, oh, these guys are just chokers. So we're trying to get over the hump here. And in the first map, I forget. So we either had won the first map or we lost it. But either way, after the one that we lost, you could tell that there was tension, right? And so you walk outside, there's the 5 guys, there's a coach, manager, myself. And we have maybe 10 minutes total before they've got to get back on stage and go play the next one. So like recovery is like massive here. And most of that time you want to be spent focused on that next map, right? In Counter-Strike, you don't know all 3 maps that you're going to play or all 5 maps that you're going to play before the vetoing begins. Sure. So, you kind of prepare and you create game plans. But, once you kind of get started, right, that's where you're going to really make a lot of the adjustments. So they ideally need those 10 minutes just to focus on getting ready for the next one. And so the first 10 seconds in that circle is just dead silence, right? And you can tell that everybody's kind of steaming inside. So I'm the one who breaks the silence and just gets people to start talking. And I kind of, basically just facilitate that conversation. And so we spend, 1 to 2 minutes just kind of venting and bitching and getting all out. And then that's it. And then they go on, they're able to reset. They go back and win, again, either that next map or the next 2. And we win, kind of our first big tournament that then kind of kicks off a successive 3 tournament win that gets us the Intel Grand Slam, which was a massive accomplishment that people in the esports, in the Counter-Strike scene, didn't think was going to be accomplished. But it had been accomplished by Astralis, who was our nemesis the year prior. But we also accomplished it in 60 days. So it was an incredible feat, $1 million kind of bonus prize on top of it. And I'm not saying it was me that sort of jump-started, but, that's one spot where, having some kind of intervention from a psychological standpoint, can kind of make the difference. Sure,
a bunch of pieces came together and everything was in sync and propelled that win. I mean, everyone has their their part in that. So one of the largest things we deal with in games is toxicity. Is that one of the large things you deal with? Because a lot of players come into esports and sometimes there are toxic players, and that's something that's happening not just in esports, but in video games. Do you see like a large market there? I mean, I know we're dealing with it in K-12, higher ed, and really everywhere, and there's not a lot of good info out there about how to deal with this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a lesser degree, I'm dealing with it. I mean, I'm certainly aware of it, right? The guys talk all the time about how, solo queues and PUBG is just so toxic. So there are instances where I'm kind of coaching them to better just how to handle that environment. And obviously, we're oftentimes dealing with, conflicts amongst players. And I kind of tend to not use the word toxicity or the phrase toxicity kind of within that. They do. I mean, I think it's just like a kind of a vernacular of it. But, really what you're mostly talking about is just like this anger, right? It's just how much are you able to restrain, these are competitive environments, and there is research that just sort of shows that when you remove like the social interaction, that people are much more likely to just spit out what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Whether without any kind of filter. Whereas when you're in a social environment, that's oftentimes curbed a lot more. But for some people, that's not the case when they're working within a team, because they see a player who maybe is not working as hard or isn't quite, is making repetitive mistakes. They can't quite understand why that's occurring, or they just have this will and drive to win that just like gets them so single-minded that they can't sort of understand that team environment is really an important thing. You have to have trust with your teammates in order for communication to work, right? I mean, you don't listen to somebody that you don't trust, that you don't really respect.
Sure.
You don't learn from somebody like that. So how are you going to sort of create that within, a team environment if we're going to try to actually like win championships and be, a great team, possibly, the best team in the world? So, some advice on how to deal with toxicity, I think for, most people listening to this, number one, if you're the one that's receiving it, try to use it and understand where your weaknesses lie. So one of my kind of fundamental rules when it comes to communication, and this is something that I've got, my communication rules that I send to all my players within Team Liquid. One of those rules is if you take feedback personally, it means that you have a personal issue. Okay? Because if I were to tell you that, you are like a yellow monkey from the planet Bleeblop, I mean, it's a nonsensical thing. It doesn't hurt you, right? But if I call you an idiot, maybe that hurts. Well, why does it hurt? It doesn't hurt because you are one. It hurts because maybe you believe that it's true. It hurts because maybe you're unsure of where your competency lies. It hurts maybe because, there's been some bullying or there's been some weak, and so there's a wound there, right? It's like I've got a bruise on my shoulder, right? If I touch my shoulder here where there's no bruise, it doesn't hurt. If you touch right there and you stick your finger into it, it freaking hurts. So when you understand that the toxicity that comes at you is not inherently causing you pain, okay? It's only exposing a wound that already exists. Now, that's a little tough when we're dealing with kids, right? We're dealing with teenagers, we're dealing with young adults, right? Where, yeah, it does hurt because you're still in a place where you are developing a sense of yourself. You're developing a sense of your own competence. You're developing a sense of your own identity. So you have to be the one that stands up and internally defines who you are, how you want to be. And you've got to almost like kind of create a mantra for yourself and have some strength there. I actually worked with a cousin of mine who, she was a little overweight, was getting kind of the negative comments. And we really kind of worked together to just like talk about like, how beautiful she is inside, what she believes about herself. And she held on to those ideas and was able to transform her relationship with that toxicity. It just didn't hit her the same way because she became the one that was defending herself against it.
Yeah.
And, when you're in an environment like that, that kind of strength is no different than physical strength, right? If you're going to defend against a lot of pressure that is coming at you, what are you going to stand up and kind of fight back with it, right?
Sure.
You need some strength. And a lot of times strength mentally means it's like the degree to which you're holding on to an idea. Yeah. That's what defines that strength.
Yeah, it's a big issue in the K-12 and higher ed arena that I'm in, is just how to handle it and everything. So it was awesome, a great explanation. I'm gonna clip that out and send that piece to my students because I think it was
awesome.
Good. So are the other professional teams now? Do they have mental coaches? Are you seeing it across the board pretty much?
Yeah. It's definitely becoming much more ubiquitous. I think there's at this point still kind of a wide variety of degrees of experience and degrees of actually degrees that they have, right? So but yeah, I think for the most part, the organizations that are kind of capitalized well enough to be able to afford either full-time or kind of contracted help are doing it because they just see the value. And just like every other major sports franchise, whether it be basketball, hockey.
So they all have this too, I assume, like professional football. Yeah. So they all have this. So what are, if someone wants to get into this field, what are the qualifications they need to get into this role that you have?
I mean, technically, it's whatever gets you hired, right?
Sure.
I mean, in my mind, and I get this, so I probably get 2 to 3 emails a month at a minimum. Asking me sort of, what my experience has been like and, what would So I'm going to be kind of very kind of heavy-handed in terms of my advice here, because I've seen a lot of people who think that a bachelor's degree in sports psychology is enough. And I think it's enough to be decent. I think it's enough to get you started. But, when you get a master's degree, there's a ton of training that is involved, especially, if you select one that, it requires a lot of those internships and those educational opportunities. Getting a master's degree is, I think, a necessity. Now, you don't have to get a master's degree in counseling psychology. In my opinion, I think it's a better route to go because you develop a skill set that you wouldn't develop from the traditional sports psychology route. And it's in my opinion that, the sports psychology stuff is easier to learn, right? It is, in large measure, more stuff that you can read books from and then just kind of have some, shadowing or mentoring experiences where you just kind of go and learn and see how those mental skills trainings and, environment buildings are actually being deployed. Being able to solve problems at a deeper level is a harder thing to have. And so the range of options with which I have to deploy when I'm working with a team or working with a player is just bigger. And so I think for that reason, I'm able to be more effective, because when we get, the instances where you've got a player who is probably never going to go see a therapist, but has issues that need to be dealt with on a deeper level, like I can be there to support them in that way. And, in some cases, it's actually allowed us to continue to win championships, right? We've had issues on Team Liquid before, and, one was fairly well documented in some of their videos a couple of years ago with this player in Angola. And I have the utmost respect for how open he was, with some of those issues. And so, we did like a lot of patchwork in kind of the first split of spring in 2018. We're still able to win. We go to MSI, which is the midseason invitational, and he kind of has like a bit of a breakdown. And so, all that patchwork kind of got broken. And so he and I kind of took a step back, and he was willing to dig deep, and, we made some pretty significant changes. And, come the summer, it was a different person. So, I strongly recommend getting trained and getting educated. It's very easy, I think, for some people to think, oh, well, I know for myself what works for me, right? But it's so different when you take your knowledge and have to apply it to a wide variety of people, be able to have a build a relationship with them and be effective. And so when you have like a really strong foundation that is education, that is training, your career is going to have a lot more upside in the long term. So yeah, you got to invest more time in the short term. But I've been building my career for 15 years, and I was not, as skilled as I was, 12, 15 years ago. As I said, overconfidence certainly served me well early in my career, but,
Yeah, and I think a lot of people feel like they're just going to jump in and be where you are at 15 years. It doesn't work like that. It took you 15 years of experience. So when you're now, taking on interns, hiring people, what are those check boxes? Is it a master's degree, some experience, or are those the kind of things you are looking for that gets that from resume to interview?
Yeah, minimums for me. I will not hire somebody that has a bachelor's degree because it's just not worth my time.
Yeah, gotcha.
I want somebody that's got, that kind of competency. But then a lot of it is competitive too, like the same kinds of qualities that we want to see in the athletes themselves. I want to see in that person too, somebody who's highly motivated, dedicated to learn, willing to go the extra mile. You got to be friendly, you got to be relatable. I think it's a challenge, right? I mean, I think, my skill set, my talent, so to speak, is, kind of like the talent of the players, right? You have to have a wide dimension to what you're able to do because you got to be relating with the players, you got to be relating with the coaches, you got to be talking to management and, kind of managing lots of different situations if you want to be really effective. No, and you yourself have to be able to sustain under high pressure situations. So another checkbox too is like, how well do you understand your own issues, right? How well do you understand your own experience to be able to draw from that? I mean, I think, the moment I was describing earlier with the Counter-Strike team, it's like, that's a high pressure moment, right? If I choke there, maybe we fail. Maybe I get lucky and the team was able to figure out and all the work we did before was enough. But, I needed to step up. And if I wasn't able to have my own issues handled, then the choking issues from, when I was a golfer would have kind of continued to afflict me. So, yeah. So, I mean, those are a lot of the check boxes that we're looking for.
How important do you think your past in golf, not necessarily that you were an All-American and at like pretty much the highest level, but how important do you think it was that you've exposed yourself to those high pressure situations to be able to deal with it, to translate it into understanding what the players in any sport or field are going through?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said it all there. It's massive. I mean, I think, to really put yourself in their shoes and understand what's going on. If you've never been in, highly competitive environments, playing for national championships, trying to win tournaments, it's hard to really understand what it's like. If your life has been too easy in a sense, like, we've all taken tests before. We've all in school and been under,
sure,
kind of varying degrees of pressure. Stuff. Yeah, exactly. It's all stuff. But, but the question is, like, how well can you conceptualize that and be able to translate it? I think it's important to have some competitive experience to be able to draw on. It doesn't have to be athletic. It could be performance, right? I mean, my wife is, was on stage and was acting, so she had to go through, callbacks and rehearsals and all, so, and the other part too is like just understanding the practice and the training environment, right? Sometimes school is not really a great representation, right? Because the standard is sort of set and you just have to meet it. But the thing about competition is, like, you never really know where that line is. Yeah. It's always rising and rising. So what do the practice and training environments really look like? If you don't have any experience in that regard, your ability to kind of translate your, sort of psychological mental framework for, helping players is just going to be limited.
Yeah. So what's next for you? Are you staying in esports? Are you, is that the field you see expanding for yourself? I mean, what's your 5-year plan?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, like so I wrote the poker books. I'm, pretty close to finishing a trading book, 10 years after I wrote the first book. So it's going to be kind of a pretty big kind of upgrade in a sense.
Yeah.
The system has become more systematized and everything is kind of, kind of lined up. And for me, it's kind of at a level of maturity, I think, that I can kind of take it and deploy it. So,
sure.
So yeah, I think, trading and esports will be kind of, I think, the next kind of verticals in a sense that, I'm going to really kind of drive as much as I've driven in poker before. I'm not going to go to golf quite yet. I think there's a lot of material in golf, and I really need to, be very well prepared to enter that market again.
Yeah.
But I still have, golf is still my first love, and I've got 2 guys in the PGA Tour that I work with, and I mentioned the one guy in the Corn Ferry one. I got another one. So it's exciting for me to be kind of working with the individuals in golf. Beyond that, I do have a mass market book idea that, I think will kind of be in the pipeline also. Cause I think a lot of, if it's not obvious, right? Like, these concepts apply in any industry, right?
Sure.
It doesn't matter. Just performance
Absolutely.
is performance, human is human. So I think it'd be cool to be able to bring some of these ideas to a more mainstream audience and, like, kind of pick your vertical of performance, whether it's in music, whether it's, trial lawyers, salespeople, you name it. I think, professorships, right?
No, anything.
Kind of,
I mean, as I was creating the questions for this interview, I was thinking, wow, how applicable is this to, I have 3 children in elementary school who are in sports, who are in Cub Scouts, to every one of those activities. Teaching them these lessons at that age will propel them to grow into adults already doing it. And just how important that would be. So yeah, I mean, I totally see the application.
And as a parent on the outside, when if you're not in check with your own stuff, right, can
sure.
Have expectations.
Sure.
And we see how much toxicity exists within parents on the sidelines of some of these sports.
Yeah.
So it can be like the mental game of parenting a child playing sports.
Yes.
could be a vertical.
Yes. All right, Jared, it was awesome. Good conversation. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. It was awesome. Appreciate it.